Good afternoon from my side here in South Africa. Good morning, other parts, perhaps also good evening. It is really a great pleasure for me to welcome you to our sixth webinar in our Be Open Access Smart webinar series. So for those who don't know me, my name is Ellen Tice, and I am the Senior Director of Stellenbosch University Library and Information Services. It is really delightful to have you all here this afternoon. I noted we have quite a number of our colleagues from other universities in South Africa. We also have delegates or attendees this afternoon from a number of other African countries who have registered, and as I said, they will hopefully still join us. And we also have, even further than the continent, also from several other countries who have registered to attend this afternoon. We are really pleased that you joined us as we continue to explore the principles and practices that are reshaping the research landscape through open access and open science. This webinar series is designed to equip our researchers, librarians, students, and academics with the knowledge and tools needed to engage with and benefit from open access, serving as both an advocacy and capacity building platform. This series explores key dimensions of open science and open access through expert presentations and interactive engagement. It offers valuable insights into how openness can enhance research visibility and impact while fostering a more collaborative, transparent, and inclusive scholarly ecosystem. As some of you may have heard, as Professor Chan said, we have actually known each other also for many years in the same collaborations with and engagement with Kathleen. And if I think of when we started and in 2026, we still, the work still has to be done in terms of advancing open access. So there has certainly been progress, but I think a lot of the challenges still exist, especially from many parts of the world where we cannot actually, and this is why it is important. It doesn't matter how many of these are happening around the world. We have to continuously discuss this and see what do we still have to do to improve. So today's, in that vein, today's webinar is really particularly significant as it examines how open access can be leveraged to advance a more equitable and inclusive research environment. We are honored to welcome Professor Leslie Chen from the University of Toronto, Scarborough, an internationally renowned advocate for open science. And I'm sure many of you who have done research and have written articles and books and chapters would certainly have cited him. I did for many of my papers and conference presentations. And he will deliver today's presentation. We are equally privileged to have Ms. Kathleen Schreier. She is the Executive Director of the Confederation of Open Access Repositories, COAR, an international association of repository initiatives that seeks to advance open science through a global network of open access repositories, facilitating our discussions. She is globally recognized also as a leader in the open science movement. These conversations are especially important, as I alluded to, as we work collectively to ensure that the creation, dissemination, and use of knowledge benefit all communities, regardless of geography, institutional affiliation, or access to resources. Thank you for taking time this afternoon to join us. We encourage you to participate actively, engage with our speakers during the question and answer session. And for me, it's also important because sometimes we say it's great and people enjoy the presentations, that we should not just reflect on how these principles and practices discussed today apply to you necessarily, but and that we learn these things. I think we've heard some of these things probably also before, but it's more importantly for me, how can you apply that? So even if it's just one thing from what you hear today, how can you go and apply that in your institution, in your library, in your research environment, wherever you work? Because it is going to make a contribution, and it will help us to change the system that we so desperately need to. So once again, welcome to our sixth Be Open Access Smart webinar. We know that today's session will be informative and inspiring. Over to you, Kathleen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you, colleagues at Stellenbosch, for inviting me to moderate this session. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us where you're from, because it's always nice to know who's there and what your role is in your institution. Just a reminder, when you're not talking, and but also feel free to put any questions that come to mind while Leslie's talking in the chat, and then we will try to address those when the presentation is over. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend and esteemed colleague, Dr. Leslie Chan, who will be the speaker for today, as Ellen said. Leslie is an associate professor teaching in the Department of Studies, and he's the director of the Knowledge Equity Lab at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, where his work critically examines the global and institutional power dynamics that shape scholarly communication systems, digital infrastructures, and research evaluation. He was, of course, one of the original signatories of the Budapest Open Access Initiative in 2001. So he's been working in this, this field for over 26 years now. And he's played a really prominent leadership role and has been active in many of the major initiatives related to open access over the years. But I think most importantly, Leslie's contribution has been that he has been one of the most prominent, vocal, and one of the few voices that have really advocated for equity and inclusion in the transition to open access. And that has been so important to keep that in mind, even though it was a minority voice in some of the discussions we've been having over the years. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Dr. Leslie Chan. Please go ahead, Leslie. You're muted, Leslie.
Hi, Kathleen, thanks for the introduction. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll get started. So I think I've been allocated something like 30 minutes. And so if you could, Kathleen, about the 25 minutes mark, just maybe ping me or something so I know I should come to a close, because I want to leave time for some questions and answers. And as Kathleen said, if you have a question, maybe you can put it in the chat, or maybe you can raise it at the end of my discussion. And I welcome feedback and pushback and criticism in particular. So I will get started. Now, the title of my talk, well, I also want to thank Ellen. As she mentioned, she and I knew each other from well back, and we've been working on related initiative on open access over the years. And as she rightly pointed out, open access is really an ongoing project, and we have made some advances in some area, but we also are still very far behind in others, particularly when it comes to changing the structural aspects of the scholarly communication systems. That has a lot to do with how we can advance justice and equity in this open access discourse. So the focus today is really how we rethink and reframe the question we have been asking. And I would argue that a lot of our original questions about open access, about making journal contents available for free for everyone to read, uh, is important start, but it has many limitations in and by itself. And I will talk about some of these limitations and why actually when we're not being careful, we could let the focus on making content available uh, become a key focus that actually can take away from more important work about addressing the structural inequities that are existing in our knowledge systems itself, both locally and internationally. So the emphasis I have today really is not about how to make open access more uh, uh, visible or or increase in quantity, but I want to raise question about the power dynamics and the power imbalances that are in the existing system, and how we can use open access as a avenue to question these existing power dynamics and change them for the better. So that's really is the framing of my talk. So that's why I put in a subtitle here with the emphasis on the notion of um, agency. So I want to talk about uh, not only what is being made open access, but who is making material open, and how and by whom, and who govern, most importantly, the underlying infrastructures that makes content available. Uh, so the question is really about who has the authority, who has the power to make decisions about what counts as knowledge, whose knowledge get privileged, and what knowledge become then open and more circulated. So these are all questions that are related, in my view, to issue about justice and inclusion and accountability. Because right now, a lot of the issues that exist with our system is that we're with the focus on output, we often forget about the issue of accountability by whom and to whom, because we just so focus on the quantity of publications by certain metrics and so forth, and we've forgotten why we do research in the first place. And often, many of us who would do social science research should be accountable to the people that we work with and to people with whom we study. And instead, we have forgotten a lot of the original reason why we want to do research, which is to better the communities with whom we work and to better provide better understanding of the scientific knowledge that could better everybody overall, not simply to improve our own career path and reputation. So I want to also talk a little bit about how our existing system intersect with these kind of dynamics and how open access could be a way to question some of these issues. So a very quick background about how I come to question some of these issues. From the very, very early day of the web, and Catherine mentioned that I was involved with the Budapest Open Access Initiative back in early 2000. But even before that, I was working with different colleagues. At the time, this thing called the World Wide Web in the early 90s became possibilities for scientific communication. And in fact, the original purpose of the World Wide Web, as conceived by Tim Berners-Lee, was to facilitate the kind of free exchange of knowledge around the world. And so we were experimenting with this notion of a free access platform to allow colleagues who publish journals in the so-called global south or the developing world to make their journal accessible online for free. And that was before the formal definition of open access at the time. And over this long period, I've worked with many very dedicated colleagues from across different countries in Africa's and other global South countries. And this is a good reminder that there are many, many high quality journals and dedicated researchers all over the world, particularly in the global South, whose work have been very, very important for their local understanding of their issues in health and biodiversities and social well-being. But a lot of their work has not been visible in the international indexing system. And so their work, even though has been available online, are not necessarily visible in the same way as some of those databases that are highly prized by the commercial publishers. So I want to talk about how these systems continue, these proprietary system of metrics. Many of you are familiar with Web of Science and the journal impact factors. And of course, over the years, when we see the world of scholarship through these metrics, we see a very, very distorted world in terms of who is producing knowledge. And again, as I said in the previous slide, scholars are producing knowledge all around the world. It's just that they're not visible because of the kind of metrics and the lenses by which knowledge are being made visible or being measured, right? So this map is obviously a distortion, is distortion because of the particular lenses which certain institutions have chosen to use to see the world. So for a number of years now, I've been interested in this question as my research area. And the question is, can we, through open access and now increasingly open science, change the existing world of the center and periphery, with the global north being the knowledge center and the other parts of the world being peripheries that supply the sort of the raw knowledge for enhancement for high level research in the global north. And so can we destabilize the system so that to make use of the power of the network to reconstitute this kind of center periphery dynamic? Because in principle, with this kind of network structure that the web provided in the early 90s, there is no reason why there is a need to be center and periphery anymore. So for the last 20 some odd years, this is the question I've been asking myself, how we've been able to shift this power dynamic from that of north to south to that of a truly distributed south-south and south-north kind of flow in terms of knowledge, and create a kind of spaces that are possible for more equitable collaboration and knowledge creation. I was fortunate to be given or awarded certain research grant, and one of the project that I oversee was a project that involved 12 other research groups from around the world, and we were looking at these questions that I just mentioned about what openness means in different contexts, and can openness disrupt the kind of unequal power dynamics that are existing in the global knowledge system. And so we have different colleagues working in different areas of the world asking these questions in their local context. And we've learned some very important lessons as a result of working with many different communities. Many of them are traditional and indigenous communities working in traditional areas of food productions and environmental conservation, and of course, social activism as well. So we learn a lot from these different projects and colleagues, and we've also worked with other colleagues that work in community-based research, looking at how communities themselves are the site of knowledge production. Is a reminder that is not only the university that create knowledge. In fact, knowledge is created everywhere, particularly in all kinds of communities around us, and but we tend to not include them in our formal uh, thinking about scholarships and knowledge production. So, an important lessons that we learn is that openness must uh, be contextualized according to different communities and regions and culture and history, but they must also be broadened to include other knowledge system and to include dialogues and communication with other community members. So that has also been one of the focus of our work. And through these work, we have really come to understand that openness does not automatically means your scholarship will be visible just because they're in the open. And we come to understand there are all kinds of existing system privileged knowledge hierarchies and what constitute formal knowledge, and of course the dominant languages of publication. All these things contribute to visibility, but more important, increasingly, we also understand that a lot of the visibility are mediated by the kind of infrastructure, the technical infrastructures that we are becoming more dependent on. Um, so one of the key lessons we learned is that, well, while initially we were very focused on making more research open and measuring the quantity as if that the more open content, somehow we have are moving along in the right way. But we're learned that actually just quantity of open content is not a good measure at all. And in fact, it is more important to understand who is doing the opening and open for whom, and who is governing that open structure or open content, who is sustaining them, and who benefit from them, and who are harmed by the system. And what we're also learning is that increasingly we have to understand that just because content are open doesn't mean that the underlying system are also equally open. So the question is, how do we ensure that we have actual openness throughout the system that enable the kind of collaborations and participation with all interested and important contributors to the system itself, so that they're not excluded by these structural design that are often invisible in the first place. So I've become also very, very interested in the notion of infrastructure and how powerful infrastructures are as a form of mediation, because everything we see is now mediated by the search system, the indexing system, the now, of course, increasingly, unfortunately, the AI system. But these systems are not designed mostly by the scholarly community. They are designed by the powerful commercial publishers and the tech industry that are often opaque in terms of their design, but more opaque in terms of their governance. So how are these quote standard technical standards made? How are these algorithms designed? How are the database structured? And what data are collected? What data are included? And all these have a consequence on how we discover and find materials that we need for our research. So we have to, so I've been reminding myself how important these infrastructural elements are, but again, how often these elements are out of our control, and in fact, we're becoming very, very dependent on the commercial providers in terms of access to these systems and the whole workflow. And so the content at the end may be open, but the entire process, the pipeline themselves, are controlled in ways that are not visible to or controlled by us. And so this system is very hard for us to challenge unless we kind of make clear what is going on in the background. And so one of the things that we've been working on, we've been tracking commercial publishers who are, of course, no longer publishing. Some of the big publishers don't even call themselves publishers anymore. They call themselves data analytic company, and because the primary business now from which they extract profit is through the data they collect through the whole research life cycle from the time people submit their article to their publication, to the peer review, to the metrics, to the analytics, to the research intelligence. All these are now being vertically integrated by the publishers into their own proprietary system, and they have become landlord to these infrastructures that universities and individuals have to rent from these landlords on a perpetual basis. So we'll give them the content, and we even give them the data and everything else. They turn them into products that we have to buy back, and also more importantly, the so-called intelligence that they provide institutions that then policies are being made and built on that further govern the kind of labor relations and production system that we're a part of. And a lot of these systems, as I said, are invisible. They're technically and politically invisible, but they hold immense power in terms of the kind of quote prestige and governance that they are able to produce. So we end up working to serve these systems again, rather than the reason why we do research in the first place. So if you're interested in some of these work we're doing, the link is not visible there, but I will provide a list of references. We've been tracking some of these consolidation in terms of these so-called vertical integrations and the kind of landlord rent extractions that these companies are exerting through the different metrics and research profiling system that they have been creating. So what I want then to remind ourselves is that these technical systems, and I would include, for example, as a good example, the digital identifier system like the DOI, the digital object identifier. These are not neutral technical objects. These are objects that are shaped and governed by the commercial entities in order to track and surveil and to control the flow of knowledge that they want to keep track of and, of course, monetize upon. And so when we adopt these technical systems, we have to ask ourselves who created these systems, who's in charge, who governed them, and what say do we have in terms of their design and in their continuation, and in their, most importantly, who make those decisions about what to prioritize, who can participate. And so these to me are really issue about power and political control, for political economic control of the system. And they have direct consequences on justice and fairness, and particularly in what I call epistemic justice, that is, whose knowledge system become prioritized or privileged in these kind of invisible technical system, so that how do we ensure that diverse way of knowing and thinking are in fact reflected in the technical design that we want to see, because right now the technical design only privilege certain kind of epistemic position. And so this to me is a really important epistemic justice issues. Now I want to come quickly to alternatives. So having mentioned all the harms and problems with these proprietary system, I want to remind ourselves that since day one of the open access movement, one of the key strength of open access, distributed open access model is that we can make use of uh, uh, some fundamental infrastructures, particularly repositories, digital repository that can serve multiple purposes. We tend to think of repository as archiving only, but repositories, as Kathleen Sears' organizations, the core, the Confederation of Open Access Repository, been working so diligently to remind the global communities that repositories are more than simply archives. They are, in fact, the key infrastructure on which many different scholarly formations can be built. And so they could be the foundational layers on which academic libraries and other academic institutions put their raw material into and then create the kind of community layers on top, including peer review, quality controls, the community-based metrics, and different kind of scholarly output. They can all be accommodated in these kind of distributed infrastructures. And the key is for us, for our different community, to come up with the kind of quote standards and values that we want to see embedded into these systems. And these systems could be created locally, regionally, or more globally in scope. And so I would remind ourselves these systems already exist. The infrastructures already exist. And it's just a question of connecting them and creating the kind of federations that the core Kathleen's organization has been building, and to come up with the kind of community governance systems that we like to see both regionally and across regions, so that we can work across differences and promote the kind of real global exchange and epistemic diversity that we would like to open access to encourage. So I have been uh, thinking about this idea of what I call C3 open access. And this is a little bit of background to it because some of you will know that there's increasingly use of the term diamond open access to refer to journals that do not charge the author or the readers for a fee. I want to remind ourselves that this was actually the very original model of open access. There was no fee to the reader and to the authors. But over time, of course, in the last 20 years or so, publishers been cleverly monetized the system into a pay to publish system, so that a lot of people still are confusing open access with pay to publish model. But open access from the start was about finding ways to support both the reading and the publishing, and most importantly, the participation of those who want to share knowledge in a community spirit. So I like to think of open access being community governed and based on the notion of the knowledge as a commons, that there are shared resources for everyone who wants to make use of them, and it must be centered on care as a principle. And care, some of you might know, there is an important care data principles that are being promoted by indigenous scholars from around the world. And the care data principle remind us about the importance of consent and ethics, and most importantly, local context and stewardship over the notion of just reuse at all costs, right? And so care really refer to using openness with consent and with share relationship and share responsibility. So I will conclude by saying that these other kind of possible worlds are already possible. It's just that we're not focusing enough on them. We're still too hung up on the journal article in a particular venue, where in fact we have lots of opportunity for us to collaborate and to work across communities and across regions and internationally. And hopefully, I have raised some interesting questions and maybe provocations for you to react to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We can't see you anymore. Oh, there you are. That was a really interesting talk, and you came in just exactly at the time where I was going to remind you 5 minutes left. So perfect
good.
time. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'd like to do now is invite people to raise their hand if they have a question or a comment for Leslie. Or if you prefer, you could put your question or comment into the chat and I will read it out. And I already see that there is one question, Leslie, in the chat, so I'll read it to you. If we replace the academic journal as we know it, what would be the academic standards? How do we assess the quality of journals?
So at the moment, there are really a diversity of journals from around the world. So in Latin America, for example, we have thousands of community-governed journals that set their standard based on their discipline, the regional language and interests and so forth. And so they have already been having their own quality standards set by their communities. What I was questioning is these global standards that are being set by the commercial publishers, so that everybody then being made to conform to these standards that are not being set by the communities themselves, but set by the commercial interest, so that they can drive publications, volumes, they can drive, quote, prestige based on those impact factors and so forth. So what I'm saying, we have to shift our understanding away from these proprietary system and join the communities that we're or enhance and grow the community that we're a part of, so that we can set our own standards that we value, and instead of subjecting ourselves to these standards that may not have anything to do with what we do. And as I'm also mentioned, community standards are really, if I look back at my own graduate school day, I was told, oh, you need to submit your work to these or that journals, and those journals at the time were indeed the communities that I wanted to be a part of as a young researchers. And those journals forms a community. The editors, the reviewers, and so forth. They were extremely generous with their time in helping young scholars and so forth. But today, if you submit it to a commercial publishers, you're sending into a black hole. Months later, you get a rejection or acceptance, and you do X, Y, Z by these reviewer, and then you get it published, and then you get some citations and so forth. You're never part of a real community, because these journals have been turned into what one of my colleagues have called the profit centers. They are there to generate profit, not to generate community standards and values that we share. So that's really the point I was trying to make.
Thanks, Leslie. There's another comment, or looks like a question in the chat. You said you were working that contribution from the Global South. How effective has that been? As you showed us the map with almost non-existent contribution from Africa, has that changed?
Yes and no. So what I'm saying also is that we not only want to show how that map has changed according to the old standards or the old lenses. We need to create new lenses for which to see the world. So if we have African-based framing to look at scholarships from across Africa, for example, we'll see a very different world. How are different medical research in across Africa's or food research contributing to well-being in those regions? Those are the kind of mapping we need to do, but they don't exist as far as I know. So we need to create different kind of maps instead of saying how can we improve on the old map, because I think that's the problem. If we don't challenge how those old maps are made, we will continue to be subjected to that power imbalance.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a good segue into the question that I had and the problem that I think we're working on at CORE, which is in a very distributed environment where you're supporting a lot of bibliodiversity, so different languages and different types of research outputs. How do you ensure visibility of that content across a global a kind of distributed, federated global network? And I think that's really the challenge, because if those research outputs are visible, then we can map them onto a proper map that reflects the research outputs from around the
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So any other questions people would like to raise?
Ellen.
Hi.
Yes.
You have a
So yes. Well, I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to stick to two, because Leslie had really made me reflect and thought about quite some of the issues and challenges that we're still facing. So I'll just mention one or two things, and I think. Again, thank you, because, just setting out so clearly, and sometimes one probably just have to step back and see, what more can we do? And I sometimes get a little bit depressed, because even though we have tried, especially from the library side, to advocate to set up repositories to encourage mandates for open access, and had demonstrated through these initiatives how we make the research visible, the universities' research visible, how we contributing to their goals in terms of the research impact by making it more accessible in terms of our partnerships, also that we have with other institutions who may not have access. However, it feels that, we get there. We, in our case, we noted the other day about over 70, probably close to 76, 78% of our research over the last 2-3 years have been published in open access journals through some of the initiatives that the library had done here at Stellenbosch in terms of, the transformational agreements. But of course, we know also there are huge challenges with that as well. But it doesn't seem that the message is getting through, because then when the universities still have strategies that says, we want to encourage our researchers. So the standard remain the Northern Hemisphere standard. Now there are examples. China had done it, India to some extent, Latin America. where they had set their own standards in terms of, quality. But it seems like in our part of the world, we still believe that the standard and the quality is what comes, from the north. And then you think, but look how much you have gained and you can benefit, how much it can contribute to your own goals in terms of what we can do in terms of development within the region. But somehow it doesn't seem to be, unless you publish in that journal that's recognized as an international journal or quartile one journal. So my big issue is, what more can we do to change this belief that the standard for us in terms of publishing, that it has to be the northern standard. And I just want to say perhaps one or two other challenges. The one is, of course, just this morning we learned that Wiley had acquired Emerald. So the if you want to say the control or the domination of the commercial publishers, that they just continue, they're just getting stronger. So how can we break down that monopoly that they have? Because, and I guess institutions are captured to a large extent because it gives them prestige, it gives them the world rankings in terms of all of that. So they believe, that's why, as you said, that they brought all these things together. It's no longer publishers, and I heard that for the first time, but of course we know in terms of data analytics. So they give the whole suite. So the universities are sort of captured by them in a sense. They're ransom, because if we don't do it, we're going to fall behind. And nobody would want to partner with us, etc. Sorry, but yeah, there's just so many aspects. So my main thing is how can we change that belief from university executives that they don't actually acknowledge and recognize that they have the power to allow these companies to have the control.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right, Ellen, because these systems are so bound together, right? And the commercial publisher understand these dynamics very well. If they control the metrics and they control the publications, they will hold you ransom because they have both, right? They can encourage you to publish in their journal through the transformative agreement on the one hand and say, oh, see, you gain prestige through these publications and now you're gaining university ranking and so forth. So once you are sort of bound by that system, it's hard for you to separate from it because you will lose out. As you said, you have this fear of losing out once you disentangle from the system. And so there are very powerful means of binding you into these systems that, as you said, also capture your ability to make decisions, right? So I have something encouraging though. Recently, I was at the Global Research Council meeting in Bangkok. The Global Research Council is an international organization that brings together all the major funding agencies from around the world to share common issues and strategies. And this past year, sorry? Yeah, and this past year, the focus was on open science and open access. And I did provide a briefing paper on their behalf. And I was encouraged to see that a lot of funders are now understanding these issues, that they have an important a role to play because they understand how much of their money, the funders' money, are being directly transferred to the publisher's hand, right? Basically, funders give the money to university and the libraries, and the library, university give it to the publishers. There's a form of direct payment to the publishers in the tunes of billions of dollars each year. And so publishers are questioning whether they should be continuing with these kind of direct payment to the publishers who are getting so rich and powerful. And so I'm encouraged to see that there are funders saying, well, how do we put our money into supporting common infrastructure instead? And so, as I mentioned, Latin America has already been doing this community infrastructure, shared infrastructure for a long time. What they are still missing are the funders' commitment to support these infrastructure. So we're hoping the funders understand that they already have very, very good existing effort. They just need to provide consistent funding to these struggling initiative rather than keep putting their money into commercial publishers' pockets. And so that's one aspect of it. So funders are wising up to it. Now, next year, by the way, Alan, the Global Research Council will be holding their meeting at Cape Town, and they will be furthering this conversation about how to reconfigure their funding to support community-based initiatives. So that conversation is something that we need to keep encouraging. The other thing that is encouraging is that all the funder, and I share a link, some of you might have heard of this organization called DORA, Declaration on Research Assessment. All the funding agencies that are at the Global Research Council also sign on to the principle that they will move away from journal metric as a criteria for evaluation, right? Now, signing on to something is different from actually practicing it, but it's still important to be in the consciousness that the funders are aware of these limitations in terms of journal metrics, that we have to create our community-based metrics that are governed by institutions and individuals. Kathleen also shared another organization, Coara, that works on similar ideas based in Europe. And in Latin America, they also have their regional initiative working on regional community appropriate metrics. So when we look at these metrics initiative, or these evaluation, research, assessment, and publication platforms, and of course community governance, all these things can be shifted. We have the power, we have the knowledge, we have the people, and I think most important, we have the people to do all these things. It's just that we're not putting our effort together in a more cohesive way, right? And so I'm still hopeful after 20 some odd years, as you said, is an ongoing project. And I think these are the directions that we like to collectively move forward toward.
Yeah, I also have a sense that the discussions around research assessment are starting to change things, and will begin to have a bigger and bigger impact on the institutional decisions around where to publish and so on. We've only got 3 minutes left, and there's 2 more questions in the chat, which I think we're going to have to bypass because I should now turn it over back to our hosts to give a kind of a wrap up. But I want to say, first of all, thank you very much, Leslie, for your insights and your always knowledgeable presentations. And thank you very much, everyone, for participating in the webinar. It was great to see so many people attending. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our colleagues at Stellenbosch.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, and thank you so much to Dr. Leslie for provoking us into thinking differently about this. So, colleagues, as we conclude our 6th Be Open Access Smart webinar, I just want to really extend our sincere appreciation to everyone who contributed to its success. Our heartfelt thanks particularly go to Professor Leslie Chan for his insightful and provocative presentation on advancing inclusion and equity through open access. And we also thank Ms. Kathleen Schrerer for expertly guiding today's discussion. Our appreciation also extends to Ms. Ellen Tice, who is our leader here at the library, for her leadership and continued commitment to open access. Finally, I want to thank all the participants for joining us and for your active engagement. Your presence and contributions, of course, have enriched today's conversation. Without you, there would have not been a webinar, of course. Once again, on behalf of Stellenbosch University, thank you to the speakers, the moderator, and participants. Now it's time for me to announce the next webinar in our series, webinar series. It would be Making Open Access Count, Approaches to Assessment and Reward. And it would be led by Dr. Andiswa Mfengu. Dr. Mfengu is the Senior Lecturer in HOD at the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship at the University of Cape Town here in South Africa. So there was a lot of talk about assessment and reward for open access here. We are looking forward to that presentation by Andiswa. Thank you so much. And I must just say, have a wonderful day further, all of you. A wonderful evening and a wonderful morning. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.